Pika, I'm not yelling at you. I don't consider anything to be anyone's. I don't believe in blame anymore. I believe in contribution. And how did you contribute to this mess? Oh, it's Drinker's fault. Oh, it's. Well, then that makes it okay. Look, he's union. They don't want to mess with them. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's time for the 31 days of Halloween. That's right. We are doing a horror movie a day all through the month of October. That's a Kevin Smith reference, you mother lovers and daddy humpers out there. That's right, and anyone in between in this grand spectrum of humanity on planet Earth and beyond. Welcome. Yeah, we're doing double duty with daily content. And in October, we did it last year. We survived. We thought we could do it again this year, and been doing so far so good. Happy Friday the 13th. It's Friday the 13th is today. We have been covering the Friday the 13th movies. I'm going to play it behind me at 10 times speed. So it'll be over in 13 minutes, I think. It's any nudity, don't worry, my big jug head and the microphone obscured enough, see, I'll try to be mindful, but just like make sure he's running really fast and loose today. It's because that's a rated R slasher movie playing behind us. So there are no bonus features on this disc. It's Friday the 13th, and we are covering Friday the 13th, the 2009 remake reboot. Yeah. Let's get to it. Well, yeah, I got my fuck it bucket, which is full of candy. Not for children. It's for me. Yeah. I'm not giving these out. I'm keeping them. But we can also look empirically and say, like, oh, obviously plain M&Ms are my least favorite candy of the four, because I'm actually eating the Milky Way before the plain M&Ms. And I love Snickers. They really satisfy you. And I love Twix, but I have to eat them. Now I've always been kind of weird and OCD. So for every left, I have to eat a right, or I feel like I'm going to become one of these Twitter morons. And just, now start to hate myself. After all these years of trying to get me to love me. Oh, no. See, we're doing we've been doing the Friday the 13th movies. We have. And, well, maybe at the end of the movie, it'll have a nice menu with the art where we can just, like, chill out and not care. But, yeah, it's the guy from Supernatural. And the chick from and CW's The Flash. Two CW show people are on this, and I think, and right around the time those shows began. This was made in 2009. So yeah, we got. Let's get into it. Let's read the wiki. But yeah, I had never seen this before. I grew up watching all of these Friday the 13th horror movies. This kind of flew under my radar. I knew it happened. I thought it was a bit more recent ago. But, it's not that far. It's just a little over a decade. And, yeah, and it's Friday the 13th. Isn't that funny? And what a great day to wrap this up. We had started off the series with the Shout Factory box set. I hope you get your own. It also came with this replacement discs. Now, I don't know what was up with them. I played all these movies and they played fine. So there's a spare copy of Friday the 13th, Part 3 and 3D of Jason X, which we covered last night, and Jason Goes to Hell. So I wonder why they needed replacement discs. But someone did ask me too a question in the chats and comments about, or even on the Twitters. I hope you got your replacement discs with it. And I was like, yes, I did. And this was the sticky thing that was on the side of the box in the wrapping. So I kept that too. I put that in the side of the box. But with the replacement disc envelope, it's a weird and wonky kind of fit. The replacement envelope really doesn't fit flush inside the box. Yeah. And so now it's a little too tight in there for all 12 discs. But hey, it was half off. Maybe that's why. It literally was. I caught such a deal on this box set that I knew I'd be watching. I knew I liked these movies. I knew I'd be watching them all. I knew I could make them next year's content for this very show. And so I pulled the trigger on it. It was literally half off. And plus, Shout Factory makes pretty good discs. Now, the later ones, like Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, and specifically this one, we'll get into its production story in just a moment. Because I like to know these things. I love movies. I love production notes. I love cinematography. I love sets. I love special effects. I love stunts. There's so much for me to like about horror movies, and especially these nostalgic Friday the 13th movies. They began back in May of 1980. May 9th of 1980. Directed by Sean S. Cunningham and screenwriter Victor Miller. These are names that come up again and again and again. And Frank Mancuso Jr. and Fred Manfredini. These are like the names, in Kane Hodder. They're the names that perpetuate Amy Steele. These are the human people behind the scenes and in front of the camera that are first in mind when you think Friday the 13th, the movies, as this, ongoing thing. Steve Miner directed the next two. And so between May of 1980 and July 28th of 1989, when Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, that's a big part of me growing up. And I go from 7 going on 8 years old in 1980 to 16 going on 17 in 1989. And that was filled with these horror movies, and specifically these Friday the 13th movies. So happy Friday the 13th. Seriously, this is it's an auspicious day because this is the day that the French king went after the Knights Templar in France for all their money and possessions, and so that I think that is the reason why Friday the 13th is a day of notoriety. An unlucky day. I like Milky Way. Yeah, more so than plain M&Ms. And guess what? And it's like I'm saving, and I love peanut M&Ms, which are like probably my favorite. So I'm saving them. But it was like a $30 bag of candy. I'm like, gee, are you kidding me? Wow. They really got used parents guys by the garbanzos, don't they? Mm-hmm. But enough about me. More about the movie. Mm. It was also, I'd be a little bit delinquent or not to. I watched the shit out of this show. Have you ever heard of Friday the 13th, the series? It was a TV show, a syndicated TV show made in Canada. I'm pretty sure it was made in Canada. I'm going to read this from the wiki. It's Friday the 13th, this series, with Roby. How could you forget Roby? She had the parallel single of One Night in Bangkok. I played on the welfare pop channels, those video stations. You never saw that on MTV. You only saw that on on V66 or late night videos here on Channel 38. That's not a real show. V66 nonetheless was. Friday the 13th is a fantasy horror television series that ran for 3 seasons between October 3rd of 1987 to May 26th of 1990. That's my freshman, sophomore, and junior years in high school. In its first run syndication, the series follows Mickey, a gal, and Ryan, the dude, who are cousins who inherit an antique store. After selling all the antiques, they learn from Jack Marshak that the items are cursed, and they have to work together to recover all the objects and return them to the safety of the shop's vault. Originally, the series was to be titled The 13th Hour because 13 has being an unlucky number. Why is 13 is unlucky? Why is 13 unlucky? The number I'm getting this from Wiki, from Google rather, from the University of South Carolina, from a 2022 post. The number 13 may be associated with some famous but undesirable dinner guests. In Norse mythology, the god Loki was the 13th to arrive at a feast in Valhalla, where he tricked another attendee into killing the god Balder. In Christianity, Judas, the apostle who betrayed Jesus, was the 13th guest at the Last Supper. And then comes the, let's look up Friday. Friday the 13th combines 2 taboos. That's from USA Today, so I don't know about that one. But there is a wiki about it. The history, Christian associations in the 19th century. Oh, I totally thought it was about the Knights Templar. It doesn't say anything about the Knights Templar here. Let's see if Pika. This is why we do Friday the 13th Knights Templar. Oh, why Friday the 13th spelled doom for the Knights Templar? And see, I was right. Yeah. It was founded around 1118. The monastic military order devoted Holy Land, blah, blah, woof, woof. By the turn of the 14th centuries, the Templar had established a system of castles, churches, banks throughout Western Europe, and was, besides the Vatican and the royalty, they're the biggest landowners, and probably equal to stature and power and land and money and wealth and in military resources as any of the other royalties, the royal lines, like France, Spain. They were like a nation without a land in a way. They were very, so when was this? Okay. For the Templars, that end began, and it all came to a very astonishing end. And, for the Templars, that end began early in the mornings of Friday, October 13th, 1307. So today is a double auspicious day. Today is a bad day to be a Knights Templar. Indeed. But yeah, Friday the 13th, the series, it was, running time was between 45 and 46 minutes, ran for 3 seasons, 66 episodes. I always ironically thought that the wonderful British character actor, Roy Dotrice, was the old man in this. You had the 2 young 20-something kids, and then you had the aged, the mentor character. to as the source of wisdom. Despite the title, this series has no story connection to the film of the same series as the title, as Jason Voorhees does not make an appearance, nor does any character connected to the film. But there's it was supposed to have its third season was supposed to have a full season, but it was cut and canceled at episode 20. There's only 20 in season 3 out of probably 26. The last two, now Frank Mancuso Jr., who was a producer on Friday the 13th, the series, I heard in this wiki in the last 2 episodes, it's legend that he wanted to introduce Jason's iconic hockey mask. Oh, look, a menu. Good. And it's so weird. This doesn't have a real, menu with art. Interesting. If you need a replacement copy for anything, how about something like that? Maybe a director's commentary track. I love director's commentary tracks. It's like one of my favorite ways to watch a movie, especially if you've seen it a few times before. You'd be like, oh wow, this throws a completely new spin on this for me, because they talk about everything I like to talk about: production, acting, the writing, screenwriting, sets, things that happen on set that go sideways, that you have to recover from, and the audience doesn't even know what happened. Those are some of my favorite stories, like Bruce, the electric shark of Steven Spielberg's Jaws, and it ended up being a more tense film because the malfunctions with the special effects led to it not being not on camera as much until big reveals in the third act, making it a bit more menacing and a bit more tension. This was this unknown. It was interesting. Yeah, that worked, huh? But yeah, I just Friday the 13th the series, and it was on one of the UHF syndicated TV shows, and I think it was channel 68, which was kind of hard to get. 68, the actually the lower down the band, the closer you get to VHF. So, channel 25 always had a nice strong signal, but 66 and 68, it was like kind of, you had to hold your antenna with some tinfoil. Put your bare foot on the window jamb. That always worked best. Ancient television, yeah, but the series had nothing to do with the movies, such as this one. It's the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th. It's not a remake. It's a rebooting. I see it as more of a celebration of this grand franchise. It's not a great franchise, but it's grand. It spans. It's had plenty of life in these tales of sordid sex, drugs, and death. When it comes down to it, sordid. it was just teenagers being teenagers. And what does Jason represent? Or what does the Shape represent? Or what does Leatherface represent? Do they represent anything? Was it supposed to be the sense of this teenage, bursting of youth and of potential to be judged and squashed by some force bigger, older, and greater than them? I don't know. I just like talking about movies and horror movies. So yeah, Friday the 13th. It's the 2009 film. It was directed by Marcus Nispel, written by Damian Shannon and Mark Swift. It's a reboot and 12th installment of the franchise. And Nispel also directed the 2003 remake of Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Shannon and Swift wrote the screenplay for Freddy vs. Jason, also from 2003. And this film was produced by New Line Cinema and Paramount Pictures, Platinum Dunes, and Crystal Lake Entertainment, distributed by Warner Brothers domestically and Paramount Pictures internationally. Therefore, we have the Friday the 13th title back. New Line got the rights to Jason Voorhees, but not the right to Friday the 13th, the title. Here we go. Jared Padalecki, you might know from all 15 years of CW's Supernatural. You might know Danielle Panabaker from all 8 seasons of CW's The Flash, where she plays Dr. Caitlin Snow, aka Killer Frost. Really good handling of that character, too. I love the actress. So those two are big names. And then we have teens that will, eventually end up getting killed. And it's interesting because in the cold open, it chronicles the cycle of Jason pretty quickly. We have a black and white cold open where it looks like it's someone who not Alice, but it could be Alice, in a Camp Crystal Lake counselor's t-shirt, and she's fighting with Mrs. Voorhees, and they struggle for the machete, and it looks like Alice cuts off Mrs. Voorhees' head with young Jason, the misformed child, in the weeds, unnoticed, unheard, watching the whole thing and the death of his mother. Fast forwards years later to and it was also that the flashback scene was set in 1980, which was cute because that's a reference to when Friday the 13th was released. In the original Friday the 13th, Jason drowns in 1957, and the murders occur the next year in 1958. And then years later. So it goes to credits and title cards after that flashback scene, and then it starts with campers, and then the bag-headed Jason from part 2, which then quickly becomes Hockey Mask Jason. So he dispatches that first group quickly. There's a final girl in that cold open. Because we come back to this trope. It plays with final girl trope a little bit, with expectations and hope, and interesting. Yeah. Spoilers, full spoilers, as well, if you didn't know. So basically, we get to Hockey Mask Jason PDQ pretty darn quick by the end of Act 1, start of Act 2, when we're introduced to our second group of kids. And one of them is the motorcycle loner, not part of the group of frat people going to party, have sex, and drink, and drive, and smoke weed. Wow. Yeah. And the hardest drug I've ever seen in these movies was probably part 8 with the two, hip girls, the blonde and Kelly Hu, and I think they were bumping lines off of a mirror. But before that, I think it was all weed. It was just beer and weed and teenagers trying to have sex with each other. It sounds like high school to me. Yeah, and then to be persecuted, hunted, judged, and dispatched by this older, menacing, awful force. Indeed. But we get to Hockey Mask Jason PDQ. Apparently, the last girl from the cold open is the sister of the hero, Clay. Clay is Jared Padalecki on his cool ass motorcycle, and Danielle Panabaker plays the girl from the frat house crew that really doesn't like the whole entitlement thing, and she really finds sweaty, greasy motorcycle boy a bit more tasty to her palate, and those two end up are, the alpha beta. They're the main protagonists throughout the entire movie, where we find out that Clay's sister Whitney, the final girl from the first act, you know what I mean, with the mysterious ending, Jason for some reason kept her hostage, and it's because the locket that was around Mrs. Voorhees' neck when she got her head cut off, that Jason took as a memento, has a younger picture of her, and she looks almost exactly like Clay's sister Whitney, and that's why Jason's keeping her alive. So we kind of have this like little kind of like play with the whole part two Ginny thing with the sweater and the child psychology. And so by the end of the movie, of course we go through the kills, and where's my right? And by the end of the movie, there's the trio. So you have two final girls and the hero, and they're all struggling to escape this final the climax. And guess what? I was so surprised, but Danielle Panamaker doesn't make it. She gets killed. And so the final gal ends up being the sister the entire time. And then they're on the dock at the end of it, where they push Jason's body into Crystal Lake. Good riddance. They throw the mask in the lake. They threw the locket in the lake. And the last scene is a failed attempt at a jump scare with the classic Jason rising from the waters and pulling the girl under the water, which we know could or could not be real. That might be just like, her anxiety, and it leaves it there. And there was no sequel to that, movie wise. It stands alone. So was it a good movie? Yeah, it was pretty fun. It was entertaining. A lot of good practical effects. It respects the source material all the same, while presenting a new situation in an updated circumstance. It's what you really... This is a good example of when the fandom cries out, respect the source material, respect the lore. You know what I mean? And this does it too. It does everything. And it's also the same year that it was done with Hills Run Red in 2009. So I got actually two horror movies, not just from the 21st century, but from the same year, that were our horror movie offerings for 2009. Before messaging and before representations and all the just the social warrior stuff became prevalent from 2012 to 2015, and something like this wouldn't be made today because it's a classic slasher movie. TNA, damsels in distress, victimization and objectification. I mean, just objectification rather. But it also, it does a good job. It was apparently it feels like it was made by somebody who loves the movies as much as I do. And so I appreciate this. I respect it. It's not the best one in the series. It's not bad. It's definitely better than 8 and 9, and it's better than Jason 10. I'll give you that much. Best death scene. Best death scene in this movie. This had a pretty good body count, and so it had a pretty good way of because that's what it's about, titillating and doing something you haven't seen before. We do, so it's okay. It's like a 2-part kill, and so Jason has stuffed a girl into her sleeping bag, and by using the existing campfire out in front of the tents, has strung her up on a tree branch over the campfire, and she's screaming for help because she's being burned alive. And this is completely, for me, right out of Game of Thrones. This is such Tales of Ice and Fire stuff. Something like this actually happened in the Tales of Ice and Fire. Eddard Stark's brother and father died like this in a way. the Mad King Targaryen had put the father in his armor and suspended him over a fire, while Eddard Stark's brother and rightful heir to Winterfell was given a chance to save him through to beat the fire, but it was had this thing put around his neck, like this piece of leather that once it dehydrates, it slowly strangles you. So he was, that's how, yeah. So this death scene is like completely G.R.R. Martin kind of has it in its DNA. So poor girl is like upside down and in her, being roasted over the fire. So the hero boy races in from the weeds where he was he just found his best friend's glow stick, and he's running, oh my god, there's a maniacal killer out here. And he hears the friend. He's going to save the friend, and he steps into a bear trap. And then we get this great practical effect of just meat and industry and of torn flesh and of grievous wound, and he's trapped, and he has to watch his friend burn. And it's such an un-Jason way to kill, is to use fire. He's more of he's the classic slasher. He did use a bow and arrow in one death scene. He's done that before with the harpoon in part 3 3D, and he did it before, I think, in part 2 there was a bow and arrow. I think, was that part 1 or part 2? I think that was part 2, was the bow and arrow. And so that's been done before. Yeah. It's a little impersonal. So, but I think that was new for Jason, setting, I think literally he's more hands-on than that. Oh, how gruesome. But yeah, she didn't look too hot after. Oh, I didn't mean to say that. That was a legitimate slip of the tongue. I mean, please. But overall, thank you. Friday the 13th, 2009. And that's it for Friday the 13th on our special October 13th, 2023. Friday the 13th. On Friday the 13th, we wrap up our series with Jason, his mom, Alice, Ginny, Tommy, Montague, Capulet, Alexa Doig. So, who is the hottest chick in all of these movies? Wow. Could be part 4 with Judy Aronson, who I love from American Ninja 1 and Weird Science. We've got to see, her topless. I think it could be Tracy from part 2. Okay. Yeah, and I got to think for Amy Steele from part 2 too. She's really pretty. And we don't get to see her though, because she's the final gal, the virtuous one who didn't take her clothes off, who didn't have sex, and who didn't, drink or drug. It's all there. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so very much. Happy Friday the 13th. It's the 31 days of Halloween. We are doing a different Halloween movie every day through the month of October, celebrating this Halloween spirit. You might have your own list going on. If you do and you need suggestions, there's a playlist here. I got plenty of suggestions, last year's playlist, and anything I covered this year. I'd like to hear what you said. Like my friend Cecil. Cecil? Hello. He's watched 4 the other night, and he was like, he doesn't get it. How do these 12 campers, why are they still there at Crystal Lake when, literally, continuity-wise, in part 3, the night before this happened? And, yeah, I like that. It's or maybe even sometimes we think way too seriously about these fictions, and they just need to be enjoyed face value. We will be doing we're following up Friday the 13th, the series, with the series itself, the Nightmare on Elm Street collection. We're going to wrap up these two up. Oh boy. There's also a bonus material disc. This is like the Love Shout collection. Just to show you real quick what's on this thing. New interview with composer Harry Manfredini, who basically gave original music, I believe, to 7 of the 9 movies, or 10, and just like only 2 of them, he got reused like completely. But it was all, he was like, his name is like on every single one of these. Secrets galore behind the gore. Crystal Lake victims tell all. Jason forever. Yeah, huh? Wouldn't that be wild? And Friday the 13th, the series, the last episode, they have the hockey mask. But then we're going to do this. Freddy versus Jason. 2003, the final official movie for either one of them. Nightmare on Elm Street will get a remake. I've never seen that. We're not covering that this year. The book is full. We have a whole menu of different slasher, but wanted to do an emphasis on slasher movies of the early 80s and late 70s and early 80s, and directly inspired by them as well. Let's see The Hills Run Red from last week, earlier this week rather, Tuesday, we did Hills Run Red, and that too, like 2009's Friday the 13th, is a celebration and a love letter to the subgenre of the slasher film, which is in the genre of horror film. We're going to be hanging out with Freddy Krueger starting Sunday, because tomorrow we're going to take a quick break. So we went back and did Leatherface from 1970s original, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We've done Jason now from 1980, 81, and so forth. We're about to do Freddy Krueger, who starts, I believe, in 1983, 1984. But who started in 1978? Someone known as The Shape. You might know him as Michael Myers. So tomorrow, for Saturday, we're going to do a Saturday special. We're covering the original trilogy from 1978 to 1982 or 3, I believe. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Basically has nothing to do with anything going on. But spoiler, it's my favorite of these 3. We're going to talk all about that. We're covering John Carpenter's Halloween 1978, Scream Queens, Final Gal, Mass Killer, slasher movie, TNA. You know it. We are examining the slasher film this year. It's our major theme. We'll also be dipping into body horror. Got a couple lined up for body horror. I think it'll just blow your mind. But basically, the first 21 days or so are going to be spent with slasher films of this classic slasher predictability, tropes, genre, cliche, whatever. But where would we be without these? We're going to talk about these. They're not my favorite. We're going to talk about why. They're still great. Yet, this is why it's a matter of taste. And we're going to leave it there. Please like and subscribe. I would love to earn your subscription. We make daily content here. Today was a Friday the 13th special on Friday the 13th about the Friday the 13th complete series. Favorite movie of the Friday the 13th. In hindsight, as a movie, it's part 1. It holds up. Part 2 is great as well. Part 4 is great because it's Tom Savini returning with his special effects and practical effects, and it's got a lot of 80s actors. It's loaded with young talent. Jason X Part 10. Least favorites have got to be Jason Goes to Hell is the worst. Jason Takes Manhattan right behind that, and I'm very grateful to have seen the remake. Is it as rewatchable as the other ones? Probably not, but it's a decent celebration of everything that came from before it. Awesome. Thank you so very much. God bless. Namaste. Good luck. And we will see you in that dark movie theater. No candy for you.